Welcome back to Queen's Mindset. If this is your first time joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are super excited to have you here with us. Here again, we have yet another powerful lady here in studio to share her story with you. Listen, I hope you guys are ready because it gets even better. I can't wait to introduce her to you. But before we go any further, if you have not done this already, I want you to go right ahead and just hit that subscribe button just right below and make sure that you are subscribed to this channel so that you can capture every video that comes out when we drop it. So let's head right into it. Welcome, Valdeen. Welcome to Place My Set. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am good. So Valdeen, everybody can't wait to hear your story, right? But before you start to share it with them, I want you to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I usually I introduce myself first as a mom of 7 and a grandmom of 1. And the reason why I identify myself first as a mom and a grandmom is because I had 7 reasons for fighting and for surviving when I was going through my journey. I used to use the word ordeal, but ordeal says victim still. So now it was a journey.
I like that. So what do you do?
I am a journalist / reporter, senior investigative reporter by profession. I'm also now an advocate against gender-based violence and abuse, an active, very outspoken, not to be silenced anymore advocate.
Good. I like that. Not to be silenced anymore. I love it. So you have a powerful story, and we can't wait to hear your story. But I want you to share it with us from the beginning. Let's start to peel back the layers of this story and start right where it began.
Oh my gosh. If I look to go back, I would go back to when I was 19 years old, when I met my former abuser at the age of 19. I'm originally from Point Fortin, the southern part of Trinidad and Tobago. And we celebrate, and it's known, our borough is known for its Point Fortin Borough Day Festival, which is, it's referred to as Borough Day, but it's really several days, up to maybe 3 weeks of a culmination of events celebrating the borough and persons that came out of it and the icons that were produced by the borough. And that particular night in May 1995, I had turned 19 in January, and I really wasn't of the mindset to go to Point Fortin, but I decided to go still because an invitation came from friends that a particular individual wanted to see me. So I went down, even though I had 2 minds. And a turn of events led to me meeting my former abuser ex-husband. And that was the start of, it was the beginning of years of turmoil. Years of peace, in pockets of peace, but plenty years of turmoil. Because I stayed in that relationship and that marriage until I was 41.
Wow. So okay. So you were married from the age of 19 to 41?
No, we were together for 9 years. I had my first 3 children, and then we got married.
So how long you were married for? How many years?
That would have been, out of the 21 years relationship, it would have been 11 at least, because it was 9 years together, and then the rest of it would have been actually married, and we stayed together for 21 years.
Wow. So in terms, okay, so in the first 9 years, were there any signs? Did you see, okay, something is a bit off here? Did you see any signs of this before you got so serious to start?
Oh yes. Now as an advocate and an unofficial counselor, we use the word red flags.
Mm-hmm.
the term red flags. And yes, I saw them. I saw them, but I didn't know what I was seeing at the time
Wow.
because I was, he represented my escape from Point Fortin and also, well, misguided love. I was in love. I did love him.
Mm.
And my first child, my son, would have come within the first, I was pregnant within the first 9 months of us being together. So
Wow.
for me, that represented this was my family now.
Mm-hmm.
And red flags would have been um his from very early in the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
verbal um I saw signs of him being overly jealous. So those were the red so but for at the time those were it meant, there's a term, the apple of your eye.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
There's a term, eyeball. I was the eyeball.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's where the misguided love came in, that unhealthy kind of love
Wow.
that we see as we think it's healthy because it's all consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what it was for me, but I didn't know that it would have led. It didn't seem, all I could see at that time was family.
Wow. So you pretty much tried to stay to make it work for your family. That was pretty
Yes.
much it. Wow.
And then Christianity
Mm-hmm.
played a lot in my life when I became a Christian. Um, because I was determined to be able to one day ask for me and my that was my drive.
Mm-hmm.
My drive was for him to be delivered at one time
Mm-hmm.
and colored thought process into coming out. I felt that my fix him.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that who was I to
Mm-hmm.
what would so
Mm-hmm.
so I held so much. A lot of times I can tell you that victims place themselves in that position because it's one of the effects of trauma bonding. So
Mm-hmm.
you place yourself in that position where you think you're responsible for the person's salvation to some extent, or rescuing the person or being the person's cushion.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt I was. And I felt if I could just stay doing that,
Mm-hmm.
one day he would see my value enough to appreciate me and stop.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
What a
Mm-hmm.
mental was going on. When persons ask the question, usually why you didn't leave, tell them that getting domestic violence, based violence, or relationships are often physical first, mental first. The mindset of a survivor, and that can't happen if you're still in victim mode.
Mm. That's an important part there. Yeah. And were you in that victim mode at that time?
Yes, even when up until I was pregnant with my last daughter, because all of my 7 children are his.
Mm.
They are one mommy, one daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And um, coming out of my situation happened when I was about 6.5, 7 months pregnant with my last daughter, who is now 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I was at factor. There was a fear factor.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the last maybe 10 years of my marriage, or maybe the last 7 years of my marriage, I stayed out of fear. It no longer was out of love. It was
Mm-hmm.
out of fear. And also it was out of uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
of not knowing what would happen, of also thinking if he could hurt me at
Mm-hmm.
this level when he says he loves, how much more would he hurt me if he didn't think he had that control over me anymore?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. But you
And
said something. You said something earlier. You mentioned a phrase there that I would love for you have you expand a bit on. You said trauma bonding. Can you explain to us what that really means?
Okay, so trauma bonding means when you mistakenly think that you can either fix the person, or sometimes what happens too is, and this is one of the causes that I've been fighting for quietly mostly, one of the things that I think legislation has to happen in my country is to mandate counseling for abusers and not just counseling for the abused, because we don't look at reformation of the abuser's mind, because this goes to, it speaks to mindset, and often mindset is a result of unresolved childhood trauma, because hurt people.
That's right.
So we have no clue often of how much baggage that person, the abuser, would have suffered. But where the trauma bonding comes in is when you get that close to someone, if you spend that amount of time with someone in a relationship, so much is shared with that person about their hurts, about what they went through, about their culture and of their environment. So you bond with that person when it's like Stockholm syndrome, which is a kidnapper to someone who's kidnapped. If you stay long enough in the presence of the person and anything other than the actual roles are shared, you can bond with that person.
Wow.
And what the victim often does is sympathize, especially if you're an empath. Then you sympathize with them. And then that's where the I think I can fix the person, or I can be there for the person syndrome sets in. And that is so hard to break. That tie is so hard to break. And if you're a Christian, you also ought to know about soul ties. And there's another level of something that has to be broken also.
Yeah.
So there are so many dynamics to getting out and staying out of a gender-based or domestic violence or abusive situation or relationship. And it's not just physical.
Yeah. So what were the types of abuse that that you encountered in this relationship?
Oh my. I actually learned about financial abuse when I was in a shelter.
Wow.
I didn't know there was financial abuse. I didn't know there was religious abuse. I didn't think that I was being sexually abused, because I didn't think that me not being able to think that I could say no, that I had the right to say no. It didn't dawn on me that that was potentially rape. It didn't figure into my thinking that if I wasn't in the mood, or I didn't feel to be intimate, that I had the right to say I didn't want to, because that I know would have been a trigger. So I then found out in advocacy some of the additional types of abuse. But at that time, I didn't know about financial abuse, religious abuse, because I experienced religious abuse when he would ridicule me as a Christian woman, or if I went to church, it would be a problem when I get back home. I stayed too long, or and then I had educational abuse too, because if someone doesn't make the environment that you are in conducive for you to learn, then that is educational abuse. So if you are coming home from a class and you think you're going into an eggshell situation, like you're stepping on eggshells, or they're keeping tabs on you, and you have to reach home a certain time, and you anticipate, you have anxiety getting home, that is educational abuse, because you do not have the freedom of being able to pursue whatever you want to in a peaceful environment. So it's not just emotional, physical, verbal, psychological abuse, but it also speaks to several things. And there are common threads in most victim stories. If you listen to 10 victims, most of them would tell you that the main factor for an abuser is control.
That's right. That's right. But I think it's interesting because I mean, I never knew there were so many different levels, like different types, I should say, different types of abuse. I just knew it to be, one type of abuse, either it was the mind, it was verbal, that's it. I didn't know or physical, but I never knew that. So I think we're learning today. I'm sure some of you guys who are watching right now, you're like, wow, I didn't know that. But
Le-
she's teaching us today.
I'd like to interject
Yeah, go ahead.
that, and I'm very mindful of noting this.
Mm-hmm.
Males that are abused are underreported because there's even more of a stigma attached to a man walking into a station or telling a friend, particularly male friends, my spouse or partner
Mm-hmm.
hits me or is verbally abusive,
Mm-hmm.
because it can emasculate them and they
Yeah.
could be ridiculed. And I brought that up because women tend um, to practice more verbal abuse and emotional abuse. Some of them are physically abusive, but in examining yourself as a person, you have to understand if you're in a relationship, if you are potentially either you have narcissistic traits
Yeah.
or if you're potentially abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Because provocation is a form of emotional abuse.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be verbal provocation. You can do something that
Mm,
would provoke that person into anger or into reacting.
mm,
So females need to check themselves in
mhm,
relationships and
mm,
understand that, because you see, we too much and too often always think of the abused as predominantly females. And while this may be so because of statistics,
yeah.
we also have to understand that there are men who are being abused out there. And I don't condone any type of abuse because I would have experienced all of it. I know how it makes one feel.
Mhm,
And sometimes words can cut more than a lash.
that's true.
The action of someone knowing that they're going to do something that will hurt you without even saying a word can hurt you even more than they physically hit you.
Yeah, yeah,
And we have to understand the power of the different types of abuse, and how much trauma you can leave behind.
yeah. That is so.
And also that you can trigger physical abuse by being verbally
Mhm,
and emotionally abused. So a female, our weapon are often our tongues,
mm,
but also as a Christian, we know death and life.
mhm. It's in the
So we have
Bible.
to be very careful about
Mhm,
the words we use, even with regard to children, peers, friends. Because I look at abuse at different levels. I don't only look at abuse in the sense of relationships and spousal. I look
mhm,
at it between siblings. I look at it between friends in school. Peer pressure, what we know as peer pressure, is a form of abuse because it's emotional abuse. If I dare you to do something wrong and it hurt, it leads to you being hurt. That was emotional abuse that was experienced between two friends.
mhm, mhm,
So, girl, this thing is so deep and so far and so wide. And that's why one of the another cause that I've been fighting for is community and bystander reporting, which
mhm,
has to be another legislative change in our country and maybe in other countries that don't have it. Because when it comes to child and child sexual abuse, it is mandatory that anybody who is told of these incidents report it, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a counselor, even another friend in school. You
mhm,
feel compelled to report that your friend, whether it's a child or a teenager or a guidance officer, is told by a student,
mhm,
my dad, my mom, my neighbor, my uncle, whoever has been abusing me, whether it is physically, mentally, whatever form of abuse, it is mandatory by our law to report it.
mhm,
And GBV and abuse and domestic violence now has to reach that state of importance that
mhm,
it now should be community and bystander reporting. I think the days for a headline or part of a story that says the neighbor says that they were aware that the person was being abused has to change. It has to change. You have to, because we go back to trauma bonding. When there's fear and there's trauma bonding, the responsibility, the emotional responsibility is on the victim to report and to get the police involved. And because that victim might still be in the mindset that I need to help him, I need to fix him, I need to help her, she needs my help. She's not doing this because she wants to. It's the alcohol, it's the drugs, it's the frustration. He lost his job. He really loved me. We just fight. I've heard persons who were being abused said, we just fight.
Yeah.
So if you take away that responsibility from the victim and you place some of it on neighbors and whoever else is friends, a friend of the family, a sibling, who can see the red flags and say, okay, my girlfriend has now entered this relationship. She was the life of the party before. She was, she had a sense of freedom, and now she's always on the phone. She has to leave all of our events early. There are signs. And if you're seeing those things, it means now that you should feel responsible enough. And if you're thinking self-preservation, there are hotlines that you can call in. If you are a neighbor and you are hearing someone being abused, you can exercise self-preservation and still make a phone call on that person's behalf. You can. And these are things that need to be made in law in order for it to become effective and enforceable. If not, it would always remain, that is a woman and that is a husband and wife thing. And again, involved. Them go work it out. And then there's victim blaming. She like the licks.
That's true.
Every Monday morning, she just go back. We tired, talk to her. And again, they do not understand the dynamics of coming out.
That's true. That is so true. That is so true. So you talked about some of the types that you experienced, but tell us a little bit, how bad was your situation and what made you decide that, hey, you know what, this is enough. I have to leave.
Oh, according to Oprah Winfrey, my aha moment. So I'll start with the first part of the question, how bad it got for me. I have one or two physical scars from my journey. I didn't know I was walking through refiner's fire then, but now I know because my purpose has shifted. I didn't ask for it. Actually, I did it because years ago when my daughter, who is now 12, who will be turning 12 this month, she was 2 weeks old and we were homeless. And she is the 5th child. So, no, actually, she's the 6th. She's the 6th. So I would have had children and facing homelessness. And someone took us in. And I remember praying and asking God to help me to help others as I am. Not when I get rich, but in whatever situation He saw fit.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the power of when you pray and ask for something and it is given to you. So at that time, and often victims feel alone when they're in it. When you're in it, especially when you know friends and family are right in telling you need to get out, but you're still not there yet. And I'll tell you something, Kimisha. I have victims are referred to me now, and I've spoken to different ages, from 18 go up to maybe 40 something. And I now have to exercise empathy now, because I know when someone is not ready to come out. I can identify myself in the person because I was there too. So until a victim has gone from the mindset of victim to survivor, moving forward can't happen. Coming out of it can't happen. And moving into survivor mindset is when you have to start to think fight or flight.
That's correct.
One out of the two. And I wouldn't suggest fight. Because you can have pepper spray, you can have a taser, you can even equip yourself with a weapon and you could be disarmed and you could be hurt or worse. Because someone that is coming at you with ill intent is only an act of God can stop that. So I recommend the person's flight, but strategic flight. If you've ever seen the movie Enough with Jennifer Lopez, or Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts, you have to look at, I'm not saying to go and learn self-defense and try to beat up the man or the woman. I'm saying look at how you can get out, preferably with the assistance of the relevant authorities. Do not, you can, and we've seen headlines where persons think, he allowed me to leave or she allowed me to leave, but they go and stay by the homes of family or friends where the abuser is aware they can be. If you're dealing with an abuser that can reach the level or the state of mind of homicidal, suicidal, then you need to think about also protecting other persons beside yourself. So you don't leave an abusive home and go and stay by your mom or your best friend. Listen, and these are the persons that are happy to take you in because they know that you need to get out. So they see themselves as the person that will rescue you, but what in fact they could be doing is endangering their own selves. So my advice to persons in those situations, call 800-SAFE. Call the gender-based violence unit of the TTPS. Or whatever country you're in, call the relevant authorities and please take the help you need. It might seem restrictive. Being in a shelter might seem restrictive because some of them, they take your phones away. But let me tell you something. It is better that you lose your phone and use of your phone than you lose your life.
That's true.
It is only for a moment. You would have survived. You would have survived. I survived 21 years. And when I was in the shelter, I would have been about 30-something. So that means that it was at least more than halfway into my 21 years that I was in the shelter. And look how much of my life I would have lost because of that. So staying in the shelter for 6 months to a year cannot be seen as a sacrifice when you already sacrificed 10, 15 years of good, healthy life or lifestyle. You already went through the fire. So that period of, listen, had I known some of the abuse that would have resulted after I went back to him from the shelter, the first night I went into the shelter, Kamisha, I felt like a weight was off of me. I felt rescued. I started to think like a single parent, how I would see about my children. My daughter was 9 months. The one who is 11, who's 12, she was 9 months. So I would have had 5 of them. 6, yeah. And listen, I can tell you, but again, it went back to me and my Christian beliefs. So when a phone call was made to me and he reached out, my phone wasn't taken from me. And when he reached out to me and he said he needed help, trauma bonding. And because I was a Christian wife, I literally envisioned Jesus on the cross next to the thief. And I said to myself, if Jesus didn't condemn the thief and the tax collectors and the whoever, who am I to condemn him if he is crying out for help?
Mm-hmm.
So when we started to pray on the phone, and our first words to each other was, greater that is in he, that greater that is he that is in me than is in the world,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like it was my responsibility
Yeah.
to get him, to keep him on that path.
Mm.
But I wasn't even aware that maybe it was one of the tricks
Yeah.
that would make me take him back or go back to him.
Mm-hmm.
Because I saw what I wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I saw a glimpse of his deliverance. And I
Mm-hmm.
really felt he was remorseful. I really honestly felt in that moment that he was being remorseful, that he really, because he cried. And, you know, I felt like I was getting back now, funny enough, I
Mm-hmm.
felt I was getting back the person who I had first met.
Mm.
But the person who I had first met was already possessive, obsessive, and verbally abusive.
Mm.
So that alone tells you my mindset, my
Yeah.
self-esteem, what I was dealing with, my own unresolved trauma as a child or whatever I'd been dealing with, that made me feel or think that even if he is cursed, that is okay.
Mm.
And him being jealous over somebody watching me, or, you know, being possessive, you know, on my time and keeping, that's okay. He loved me.
Mm.
And that right there is often what continues to, because abuse thrives in silence, you know.
That's true.
And that's why one of the factors of an abuser is isolation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they get you away from your family and friends. They
Yeah.
allow you to have the friends or family around you that they know not going to enlighten you, or will turn a blind eye, or will just say, I'm not getting involved.
Yeah. That's right. That's
And
right.
those are the friends and family that they would allow you to have around you
Mm-hmm.
because it works for them.
Mm-hmm. So who was your support? Did you have any support throughout this period?
Uh, yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
I I mm, I had a long distance support of family
Mm-hmm.
because I left Point Fortin, my hometown, and
Mm-hmm.
went all the way to Port of Spain, and we moved around several times also in the 21 years. We faced homelessness several times because he was a gambler.
Mm-hmm.
So we had periods of feast today and famine tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
We had periods of acute poverty. And this was while I was I was a reporter, I was a journalist for a good period of that time. So I I had on a mask. I wore a mask for a lot of that 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there were whispers and
Mm-hmm.
co-workers heard things, and you know, long after I heard from co-workers, they knew of it. Persons would talk about it, but they kept a hands off kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And for my relatives, it went back to it went back to them thinking I didn't want to come out of it, or
Mm-hmm.
that I loved him so much that I was willing to stay in it.
Yeah.
So it went back to victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I want her to intercede or intervene in a young girl and her abusive relationship. Her mom reached out to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to intervene, but I had to beg her mom not to give up on her, because that's when I told her, I said, that now is when she needs you the most. When she has reached to the point where she's crying out, she wants to come out, she wants to. She may still be in the mindset that she would love for him to change and we just go back to a happy family.
Mm-hmm.
She's still there, you know. But
Yeah.
she's understanding that love don't come with licks.
Mm-hmm.
she's actually understanding that she is in jeopardy, that her life is in danger. She's understanding those things now because the abuse would have started to progress. It would have gone from verbal to emotional to psychological. Eventually, it might have gone to a slap.
Wow.
And then there's victim blaming from both angles. There's victim blaming from relatives and friends who think you don't want to come out. And then there's victim blaming and gaslighting from the abuser. So you would hear, you see what you make me do? I's not an abuser. I don't beat you up every Monday morning. It's only if you get me vexed, you piss me off. If you didn't do that.
Yeah.
So now, because you want to fix the person, you start to second guess yourself. You start to sometimes you blame yourself.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanna really be firm about this. For victims and survivors, I need them to understand you have the right to be angry. You have the right to know that this is not right. You have the right to know that you are being abused, and you have the right to want to come out. No abuser needs to let you know or has earned the right to take that away from you.
Yeah.
No matter how much years marriage, no matter how much love you feel for that person. When there are children involved, because I am still dealing with some of the fallout of my children staying and witnessing certain levels of abuse and having to reculture their mindsets. And one of the things I tell persons who have children, whether it's male or female, does it make sense to keep a child in an environment that is toxic for the sake of staying together? Because we only think about, often the authorities, the agencies, and whoever think about, or they focus on counseling the abused. And if the child has not been physically abused or sexually abused, they don't really look at the emotional, psychological, and mental abuse. And what that child now has to deal with all of the factors of normal childhood, normal teenage years, puberty, peer pressure, hormones, all that happening, fights in schools now, sexual awareness that is too early now. You know, all these different things they already have to deal with, and now they also have to deal with being in a home that is dysfunctional, seeing their parents either verbally abusive to each other or physically abusive, seeing mommy or daddy with cuts, bruises, and injuries.
Yeah.
The instability of being from home to home, because while there are, and this is another thing that a lot of people are not aware of, they tend to think that abuse only happens in the lower socioeconomic background.
Yes.
And that's not true. Abuse happens amongst the elite, amongst the rich. There's no discrimination when it comes to abuse. It may be better hidden.
Yeah, that's right.
But it happens. Because I remember, now you would notice my campaign is Color Me Orange. It was established last year during the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence that is globally commemorated by, it's an initiative of the UN and other international bodies. It's celebrated across the globe, different countries celebrate in different ways, so commemorated in different ways, Trinidad included. And a couple years ago, the UN coined the phrase Orange the World, hashtag Orange the World. And the color orange became predominant when it came to the fight against gender-based violence. The color purple is the fight against domestic violence. But the terms have now evolved. So I took it upon myself to wear something orange every day since 2018. So I wear an item of orange every day. I tried even to get my glasses orange. I'm now adjusting to having two more eyes. I only got these glasses about a month ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I was adamant that it would either look orange or have some sort of orange. So
Mm-hmm.
the gold dust in it represents that for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah.
And I always wear something orange, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm wearing the color me orange t-shirt, or the flower in the jacket is orange.
Mm-hmm.
My skirt, if I was standing up, you'd see it's orange and black.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my my toenails are orange, and I and I and I once sported orange hair.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Last year, when I launched the Color Me Orange campaign, my hair was orange.
Wow. Wow.
It led to me almost going bald,
Mm-hmm.
but, but because I bleached it to color it orange.
The color. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So,
Well,
but it,
are actually running out of time, but I have to ask you quickly before we wrap up. I want you to tell me, I want you to say to that woman out there who is right now, she may be in a similar situation and she doesn't even recognize that, hey, this is domestic abuse. There are various levels, and something that you shared today probably got her thinking. I want you to encourage her. What would be your advice to someone right now who is currently going through a similar experience?
okay, my advice to you would be to stop enabling. It would
Mm,
be hard to do, but you need to stop enabling. You also need to understand that you have to come out.
mm,
If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the children.
mm,
If you don't have children, do it for yourself. You have to become self-motivated to self-love.
mm,
And Kimisha, it took me even now,
mm,
right? It took me a while. I'll talk about my book quickly,
mm,
right? Really, really quickly. My book, when I first started writing my book, the name of my book was From Behind Mental Bars. But that implies that I was in a prison still, which I was, because I was in college. Then God told me change the name to Free from Bars. And that's not my book. It's published during the 16 days of this year. And sequel to it called there's a sequel to it called Love After Trauma.
mm,
And that sequel is because I'm in a relationship and I have a very supportive partner. His name is Jamel Anthony Jerome.
mm,
And he is very, very active. He wears the t-shirt almost anywhere to wear it. He's very supportive in the cause.
mm,
I'm saying this because I'm say that because to understand is that there is life after abuse. And that's why I got to that stage so quickly in summing up what victims should do. Understand that if this could happen for me, it could happen for you. Don't just decide that I'm alone in it and I have to stay here and cripple yourself mentally because you're a victim.
mm,
Another thing is find things to do, even while you're there. Blog, quietly, speak out. The person doesn't have to know you're speaking out. You can become an advocate even while you're still a victim. And seek help. And create a vision board. Do a bucket list. Privately, quietly. Start to give yourself goals so that you could come out because there's a fear sometime while you can reach you can go through depression, all these different things, but be self-motivated a little. It may not be easy. Say it wasn't for me. It took
mm,
me 21 years and still counting because I still have things that I deal with, right?
mm,
And the book Love After is a two-sided male perspective, my perspective on the emotional baggage that I now have to deal with in a relationship, the trust issues. And it's also the male perspective from my partner who talks about how he has coped with my traits or with me,
mhm,
you know, coping and deciding there is life and love after trauma. Also, when I said find hobbies and stuff to do, I am now on the verge of launching with my sister Zakia Hines, sister artistic jewelry line.
mm,
And we spoke about this years ago, but although I had moved back to Point temporarily,
mhm,
I was under fear, being, tabs were being kept on me by one. So I didn't have room to be creative. I didn't have environment to learn or to bond with my sister that we can have a business. It's hard going into business facing financial abuse. There would have been tension between and I if the fund supposed to be for business was for something else. He controlled my finance, and merging our finances would have resulted in anything else for our business. Not that space where I can do that. You set goals for yourself, Tim, to become a survivor, then that could help you one step further to coming out strategically.
Wow.
Set where you want to reach, even if it's just a better relationship with my one adult doesn't want to do with me because I've stayed. So even if it's their father. So now all coming out of it would be I come out so that I can have a better with my adult children.
I love that. I hope you guys are taking notes because he gave some really, really solid advice. Guys, we really want to thank you so much, for joining us tonight. We definitely enjoyed it with Valdeen sharing her story here tonight. I know you guys can feel free to share this link with someone. Let's not keep this to ourselves and let's not assume that someone doesn't need it because we don't know where they are and what they're going through. And that they're not going through something similar, they may know someone. So share this link with them. Make sure you comment down below. And whatever you do, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Thank you guys so much for joining us here tonight. We definitely enjoyed it. Valdeen, thank you so much for sharing, from your heart. You shared a lot of knowledge here today. I learned things new that I never knew. So I know that persons who are watching right now, they're also learning too as well. So thank you so much. So guys, whatever you do, be safe out there and have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Most definitely.